Welcome to my recap for the approaches topic. So this is for paper 2 on AQA psychology. Okay, so approaches on paper 2 AQA psychology. I'm just going to start off by saying if you can like, follow, share with your friends, subscribe, that would be fantastic. And I'm going to keep making these videos over the next few months, hopefully in time for your mocks and your A-levels. So keep following and you'll see the updates. Okay, so I'm just going to go through the introduction. It's going to follow what you probably are familiar with, what we call the green-haired textbook, the AQA recommended textbook, and that is obviously matched up to the specification. So psychology can be considered many things: the study of the mind, the study of behaviour, and the study of human beings. Essentially tied together in a sentence, it is the scientific study of human mind and behaviour. So as you will be aware, it's considered a science, and therefore we work in the methods with research methods, and we write hypothesis predictions, we analyse our data and our results, and obviously we're looking at humans, their mind and their behaviour. So if you come away from this session knowing one thing, it is that psychology in a definition is the scientific study of the human mind and behaviour. And obviously we go about that in a real range of ways, and those are what we're going to be looking at over the next few sessions. So keywords, and obviously as you do with any YouTube videos, please feel free to pause at any time and check your definitions, note these down so that they match what you've got, and you can pop these into your own notes. All of this content will go with AO1, so your description, and then it gives you the chance to evaluate it and look at exam questions as well. So watch the videos, make notes, and then you've got a chance to look at some exam questions as well. So psychology, the scientific study of the human mind and its functions, essentially those functions affecting behaviour in a given context. That is one of many definitions that you will come across for psychology. It's got that keyword scientific in it again, and again looking at human mind and its functions and behaviour. So we need to know what a science is. So the means of acquiring knowledge through systematic and objective investigation, and the aim is to discover general laws. So obviously from studying GCSE, you will be familiar with a science from biology, physics and chemistry, and psychology fits under that umbrella. And if you are looking to do it at university, it is considered a science at university. But the big problem we have is that obviously we are studying humans. Humans are unpredictable, and they don't fit into the cause and effect necessarily as you get with chemicals and the other sciences. This one is a word you probably haven't come across before, but you will become familiar with by the end of this session. Introspection, the first systematic experimental attempt to study the mind by breaking up conscious awareness into basic structures of thoughts, images and sensations. So this comes from our friend Wilhelm Wundt. So Wilhelm Wundt you will look at the beginning of the course in Origins of Psychology, and he developed this idea of introspection, and it sounds more complicated than it is. It's a systematic experimental attempt to study the mind by breaking up conscious awareness into basic structures of thoughts, images and sensations. He was asking people to look inside. He would give them a stimulus, a sound like a metronome, and he would ask them how it made them feel. So he would get them to introspect, looking inward, and then he would ask them a series of questions. Now that sounds really simple to us, but he was working at a time when people hadn't done that before. So it was very much kind of the first scientific lab. So he was considered that first scientific lab. So psychology on its own is dated back to around 1880 when the first psychological lab was established, and that comes from Wilhelm Wundt. There are philosophical roots which start a bit before that. So like I am what I am, and a lot of the philosophical ideas, but we're in the specification for AQA, we're going to start with Wilhelm Wundt and his first laboratory. So here he is, Wilhelm Wundt, 1818-1879, that Wilhelm Wundt opened the first psychological lab in Leipzig in Germany, and it was Wundt who started the scientific investigation of behaviour. Psychology has its roots in philosophy and biology, and when the German doctor and psychologist Wilhelm Wundt opened the first lab at the university in Leipzig in 1879, it marked a turning point. Psychology's emergence as a separate and distinct scientific discipline. Wundt showed that empirical methods, those scientific methods, could be applied to the study of mental processes. Empirical methods of research are based on actual experience rather than theory or belief. It involved gathering data in an objective way so that researchers' preconceptions cannot influence the data. It also measures quantitative details so the patterns can be examined and inferences from the result are credible. So you've got that understanding of what empirical methods are and Wundt's first lab there and how he started to set that up. So Wundt thought that human behaviour could be studied in the same way as many other sciences, and if we could break behaviour down to its simplest components, then we could predict behaviour. So just to have you thinking, do you think this is accurate? Can we study humans like other sciences? And that's something I touched upon a little bit earlier. Why is psychology different? And what did critics say of his approach? So you might have this textbook, don't worry too much if you haven't. So can we study humans like other sciences? And as I mentioned, I did touch on that briefly earlier on. Obviously, when we're looking at humans, we can make predictions, we can carry out our research. For example, we might look at crime and say, oh, somebody that's grown up in a criminal household is more likely to become a criminal. But they're not always. Some, yes, there is a higher chance, but they're not always going to become criminals. So, but in the other sciences, if you've established a cause and effect, then usually they are going to work. So that is where psychology might be different, the very nature of it, the fact we're studying humans. And yeah, so critics didn't necessarily agree with the way that he was carrying out his research because they said it was very subjective and it changed from day to day. So here we go, a little bit more. They said that his work was unscientific because he relied on the participants self-reporting their data and the results about mental processes. And this is subjective and will vary from person to person. This means it does not meet the criteria for scientific study. So that's where it's unscientific. He relied on self-reporting their data. That's where people are talking about how they feel. And obviously, if you got asked how you felt first thing in the morning to how you feel later in the day, you're probably going to feel different. This morning I felt very tired when I woke up, but now I'm like a bit more energy probably because I've made it through the day. And that's how Wundt felt with his work. It was, or people felt about Wundt's work, that people are different, and introspection was a very difficult method to get information out of people. So structuralism and introspection we have looked at a little bit before, certainly introspection, and they do get a little bit confusing for students, so I'll just break it down a little bit. And that's exactly what structuralism does. It's isolating the structure of consciousness, presenting the stimuli in the same order each time. So giving it giving something that structure, so a little bit like your standardized procedure. So again, Wundt was the first person who actually did that. He would give them the metronome sounds in the same order and ask them how that made them feel. So that provides that structure, or the same series of questions. And then introspection is the first systematic attempt to study the mind by breaking up conscious awareness into basic thoughts, images and sensations. So looking internally and reading and registering those thoughts. So think of this like your standardized procedure that you've looked at in research methods. If you haven't, then look out for the video on research methods. And then introspection is this definition where they're looking internally after they've had like a stimulus sound played or a picture showed them. What does that make you feel? And just put it into the context of the time. 1880, he was the first person who really considered carrying out this introspection or looking inside the mind. So that then starts to make you sort of become a little bit more aware of it. Hello, so I'm just going to add in a little bit more about where introspection is used today. So I know it's not that much today, but it is a bit more up to date. So in 2003, researchers gave students a beeper that went off during the day. When the beeper went off, they had to write down how they were feeling, and that was introspection. I'd say that wasn't today, it was 20 years ago, but it's much more up to date than the original research by Wundt. And that introspection, that feeling, seeing how they felt, is sort of used today. And then interestingly, most entries found the teenagers were unhappy rather than happy, but if they'd been given a challenging task beforehand, they rated themselves as more happy. So that research shows kind of the feelings in teenagers at that time. Okay, so as with the approaches, when you come onto the approaches, we also need to be able to evaluate the work of Wundt. Now, this has come up as a question before. I'm sure if you're working in a school, your teacher has told you that 2 summers ago, it was a discuss the work of Wundt, similar to the cognitive neuroscience question that came up 2 summers ago, outline and discuss the work, the contributions of Wundt. So they do like these questions, or outline the work of Wundt. So that's where you need your introspection and your structuralism, where he set up his lab and what he was doing. Okay, so again, when you're evaluating research like this that's a little bit older, try and put it into context of the time. So his work was scientific and his methods were well controlled, because he was a doctor, he was a scientist, and he worked in the lab that he'd set up, so that he tried to keep it structured and repeatable. The introspection tasks were well controlled, and extraneous variables, where possible, were removed. This meant that Wundt was investigating the task that he set out to measure. But a weakness, it would be considered unscientific today. Wundt relied on the participants' self-reporting data, which can be subjective. Introspection is not particularly accurate, and it would vary depending on the person's mood. So as I mentioned, see how you felt earlier today compared to how you feel now. You're probably going to have feel slightly different, and so your introspection would be different. But it is a scientific approach to research, and then modern day psychology research can claim to be scientific, and that stems from that original work by Wundt. It has the same aims as the natural sciences: to describe, understand, predict and control behaviour. Psychology uses scientific methods to do this, and therefore establish itself as a scientific discipline. And again, this is broader, looking at the whole of the approach. Not all of the approaches use objective methods. The humanistic approach rejects the scientific methods, preferring to focus on individuals. And because we study human beings, demand characteristics occur, so the results can often be different. So this is the limitation of the scientific methods. Okay, so we've talked through the strengths of working scientifically and how it brings psychology into the forefront as another type of science, but also, as I mentioned right at the beginning, studying humans means that they are different, they have opinions, emotions, etc. And then as a result, you sometimes have demand characteristics. So also, when you're evaluating Wundt, you can have a think about the merits of structuralism and introspection, and how they are useful, and those controlled options within the laboratory. So lots that you consider that you could get it up to an 8-mark question. Okay, enjoy. And please remember to like, subscribe and follow for all of the new videos that I'll be putting up over the next couple of months.